In this tutorial, I will show how to use Revit to set up visualization done within Vasari, so it gets possible to compare different kind of simulation and different concepts as well as the existing context. Of course, you can do similar thing in Adobe or PowerPoint, but in this method you keep all the results within the Autodesk environment. Another benefit is that you have all the stuff in the same file and not in 50 files, for example, as shown in this example. I will in this tutorial explain how I set this up, the basic for the layout, and in other videos I will show and explain how I create these drafting views for the different simulation and legends and so on. The reason for I set this up in Revit is because within Vasari it's not possible to save or set any views up with different simulation. The only thing I can do, I can run the simulation like shown here, and if I want to simulate another concept, for some reason it remembers the other concept, so I have to close Vasari down and open it up again to have the option of simulating another proposal if it's that I want to do. Further, it's not enough just to look at one kind of simulation to get the full picture. You have to simulate the model regarding different parameters like solar radiation and wind and energy. That's why I have created this method of setting these simulation up within Revit to have the chance for comparing. Back in Revit, I start by setting a new sheet up by going to View, click on Sheet, choose a sheet that is blank so there is no title block, and I'm choosing a quite large paper size so I can have the plan views in a quite okay scale, so not too small and not too big. So this usually works quite good with this 60 times 84 centimeters. And okay, here we have one A4, and that's typical good size to have one plan inside this frame. At this point I don't know which scale it works best with, so I have created some different scales, 1 to 500, 1000 and 2000. That's the most typical scales, so I will just place them on the sheet. So now I have these top views in different scales, and I have decided I want to have all this on a plan drawing, and we can see here this is too big, so let's delete that one. This one is also a little bit too big, so let's delete this one as well. This one is maybe too small, and this one is 1 to 2000, so I would say that a scale of 1 to 1500 is a good scale for this. It doesn't have to be standard scales for these comparing sheets. So I have created another one here, 1 to 1500, and we can see it fits quite good within this A4 frame. So I delete this one again. Sometimes it could also be determined by the size of the wind simulation. So by going to insert an image, selecting the simulated wind, just to have an idea of how big is this simulation. And as we can see here, they almost have the same scale in this view. So 1 to 1500 is a good scale, also regarding the wind simulation. This one should be a little bit smaller, and I just test right now because it's important that the scale of the image is big enough, so to say, that there is enough space around the building. Something like this works quite good. Then they can be a good idea to have some kind of frame that I draw on the sheet level by going to annotate, using detail lines, draw a rectangle, just to have an idea of how big should this be, so I have something on this level that I can crop stuff to later on. Right now I have created a frame, and this frame I want to use to frame the different simulations. So when I know the approximately size, I create a scope box so I can size all the views in the same size. Then I go into the top view and activate it so I can create a scope box. And now I'm on the view, not on sheet level. In here I go to view to create a scope box, activate scope box. It should be something like from this corner to this corner, and click to end the scope box, and later on I can resize it if it doesn't have the right size. Then of course given a logical name, simulation, top view, and then I go down to the bottom and say should have a scope box that I just created. This one, simulation, top view, apply. Then this view will be cropped to this scope box, and I can use this scope box again to crop all other views. Deactivate view again, remove the image just for now, make sure I'm editing the manually drawn sheet frame, and then I can take the lines and move them onto the boundary of the view frame, something like this. And to place them equally between the A4, I can use a guide grid. So I go to View, Guide Grid, create a new one, calling this for something logical again, Simulation, Frames, and I don't need this big. I could make it a lot smaller, so it only around the drawing frame. And I know a A4 is 210 millimeters, so I could say this guide spacing should be 210 millimeters, just make it a little bit bigger. I also want to use this line of the guide grid, and I could move this down. I also want to have some kind of guide for the top of this frame, maybe something like this. And if I want to have shown a guide for the center line here, I could, instead of have the guide grid of 210, I could have it in 105 like this, and just make it a little bit smaller so not too many lines. Then I can select both frame and the lines and place them in the center, activate move, get the midpoint of the line or the frame, and then move it to the intersection in the guide grid like this. And I don't want to have this title for the view shown, so I can remove that, say no title. Now when I have found the right scale and placed it the center of this A4 frame, I can copy it, deleting this frame I just had over here. And now I can copy the lines, move the cursor onto one of the lines and use tab and click and copy. And now I'm going to copy this frame to all the spaces I want to have a view. So in this column I want to have the shadow range, this one the solar radiation, and the last one the wind simulation. So I select all the lines and I need to filter it so I don't select the viewport, press OK. So now these frames are selected. Copy from the drawing frame to the middle point of this paper size. So now I have 6 frames where I can place these different kind of simulations. Then I want to have some kind of text explaining what it is. So for this I'm using under annotate, just simple text, zoom in and try to go as close to the guide grid as possible to make a text frame, something like this. And I want to have it aligned center instead. And in this column I want to have the shadow range, and the row here is the summer condition. So underneath I just write summer, press on the canvas, and then I can change the text height if I want to have a larger text height. And I have another one, let's try with 7 millimeters, something like this. I want to have just make it a little bit smaller. Unfortunately I cannot snap to this text box, so I cannot work 100% precise with this, but it's okay. Then I can select it and copy it using the guide grid, so it will at least be placed in the same way. And the final one here, and then change the names here to solar radiation, the summer conditions, and the last one wind tunnel, also the summer condition. And I do similar down here just for the winter. So I'm looking at summer and winter in this example. And the final tip is when you place top views and drafting views for simulation, it's important you do in the right order, because if you start by dragging top views on the sheet and then drag simulation onto the sheet as shown here, then the drafting view will be on top of the top view, and it's not possible to control which view is on top of the other one. So instead of starting with top view, you should start with the simulation and place that, and then after place the top view on top of the simulation like this. Then the geometry will be put on top of the simulation. And then if we zoom a little bit in here and try to place it correct, we'll see these blue dotted lines, and that tells me that it's fading in the same way as the other ones. And regarding the placement in this direction, we can use the move and get the middle point of the view and move it to the guide grid so it's totally centered for this A4 paper. And then after moving the simulation to right spot, here you can use the arrow keys on the keyboard to move it precise on place. And sometimes it's necessary to edit the visible part of the simulation by going into the drafting view, right click, activate view. And early on I have shown a method of how to edit an image with fillet regions, and then we can zoom in and move the boundary so it matches the manually drawn sheet frame, so it gets 100% perfect all the way around. And then when you have edited, you can right click and say deactivate view and come back to the sheet level. I recommend to remove these view titles in properties and say no title. And finally, when you have set up everything with the manually drawn view frame, the text and so on, then it's time for copying these to a new sheet, and then it will go much faster to create the other ones when you have done it once. So first I create a new sheet, right click on sheet, new sheet, select a blank one, same size, 60 x 84, press OK, go back to the sheet you have set up, select the text and the frames, make sure it's only that by click on filter, remove viewports because you cannot copy viewport from one sheet to another, and OK, Control C on the keyboard, go to the new view, go to modify, under paste, select align to same place, and then you just can put in the new simulation of new concepts. And to finish the other ones, look at the other videos on how to create these different types of shadow range, solar radiation and wind tunnel views to get this kind of results. So you have the option of comparing. Here we have option 2, option 1, so we easily can tap between different options.